and welcome to another edition of Trader Talk TV. Today we've got Jason from OpenX in the office. Jason, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Jason is the co-founder and CEO of OpenX, and today he's going to talk about Demand Fusion, which is OpenX's new product. So Jason, let's talk about it. It's a pretty big thing.
Yes, for us it's huge.
So what is it?
So basically, the problem we're trying to solve is how to merge all different demand classes into one sort of super auction. So the big problem historically between RTB, real-time bidded demand, and network demand is they're just totally different buying models. One is typically on a rev share, which would be the network model, and the other is on a real-time bidded basis, so every impression receives a discrete bid. How do you merge those two so they work in concert and compete in one coherent auction? That's been the problem we've been trying to solve, and we've done it. So it's called Demand Fusion.
Let's talk about how a typical SSP works in a minute,
sure.
or as you call it, an SSP 1.0. So let's just talk about how they allocate demand and sort of...
Yeah, do you want me to just go ahead and draw that?
Please.
All right, so I'll just... this is a website, here's an ad, it goes into SSP 1.0. And basically, what SSPs do, and historically what they've done is they aggregate network demand, and that's how they started. So we'll just call these networks. And for any ad placement, they might have anywhere from 1 to a dozen or a couple of dozen networks, and they'll predict the value. So let's say for this particular impression, they think this one's going to get a $2 CPM, this one's going to get a $1.85, the number 2 network. Number 3, let's call it $1, and then all the way down to a MOP network at the bottom will absorb everything at a low CPM.
Yeah, Israeli ad networks.
And they stack rank these networks based on what they think will happen based on yesterday's performance. Yeah. And they constantly sort of iterate this, and every day is a new sort of manual process of allocating inventory based on yesterday's performance. So that's the network side of it. Along several years ago comes RTB. And real-time bidding is a very different buying model, as I mentioned, and for every impression, there's an actual auction that takes place within just a few milliseconds, or 100 milliseconds. And let's say in this case, for this example, let's say the top RTB bidder is $1.65, this guy's 10, and then down the line. So what they'll do, SSP 1.0 technology will do, is they'll look at the network demand, and they'll come up with a sort of a schematic like that. They'll look at the RTB demand, and then they'll make a choice, and it's really 2 roads diverge, right? They have to pick one road or the other. And in this case, they're likely going to pick the $2 CPM because it's greater than $1.65. So as soon as they do that, auctions close on the RTB side, and now the impression goes over to the SSP's ad server, and it goes out to Network 1, and Network 1 has a choice. Typically, networks will take the impression or they won't. Oftentimes, they'll default it. It'll go back to the ad server and go back out to Network 2. Yeah. And so forth. This process is called the daisy chain. And what happens in the daisy chain is a few things. One, every time it goes out to a network and back, time goes by. And every time it goes out to a network and back, often there's data degradation. So what happens a good chunk of the time is this will slide all the way down the daisy chain to 10 cents. So what you thought you had, $2, is very different than what you got, 10 cents, and what you could have had on a guaranteed basis, $1.65. That's the tragedy.
But it's not a single impression. These guys are buying 1,000 impressions at a time. How do you decide? How do you allocate that? Like, this is a single impression.
You basically every impression would give a predicted value at the impression level. Okay, so we're not selling 1,000. This is for every single impression. Yeah. So in this case, you got 10 cents for that impression when you thought you were going to get $2. Now, how big of a problem is this? The reality is that for most publishers, 50% of the inventory that goes through the SSP technology ends up in the network land. Okay. So it's a big problem. And how much of the time does it slide down? Any ad operations executive will tell you, or ad operations person will tell you, that this is a huge problem of networks defaulting. You think they're going to pay something, they don't, they pass it back, they don't want it. It's a huge, huge problem. So how do you solve it? And that's what we've spent the last, pardon me, I'll just break your office here.
That's all right.
We've spent the last couple of years figuring this out. 2.0, and basically we do something similar. We have the network stack. We will go and we'll have all the networks in place, and we'll have predicted values for each. And we'll also have RTB over here, and let's say we have the exact same bid. Now, I would argue separately that our RTB marketplace is stronger, but that's for another session.
Yeah.
So if we have the exact same CPMs as SSP1, what do we do differently? So here's the trick. We take the two networks in this case that are above the RTB price, and we take the highest RTB price, and we create basically a new chain or a new auction. And that would, in this case, would include $2 network 1, $1.85 network 2, $1.65 RTB bid. We'll send it out to network 1. If they default, we'll send it out to network 2. And here's the key. If they default, we'll give it to the RTB at $1.65. The key difference here is for every impression, we will maintain state. We will, and this is a proprietary patent pending technology, we will maintain state on that RTB bid such that the lowest outcome for any impression is going to be the highest RTB bid. So we've merged or fused these two demand channels to have them work in concert in one auction that combines both.
This is going to be happening in a really, really short stage, because at this stage you've sent it out that this impression's won, but you're waiting to hear back from the network whether they're going to accept the impression or not, and the second network.
Right.
Before you say, no, you didn't win the auction.
So part of the problem we've solved is exactly around that. When I say proprietary patent pending, being able to do this, separate that out, and send those to the network super fast, such that we can meet the publisher's SLA around overall load time. Yeah. And you can dial this to 100 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds, and do that effectively with a number of networks and an RTB sort of backfill, if you will, or floor. Is very, very hard to do. Look, it took us, we bought LiftDNA a couple of years ago. That was the SSP that we bought. It took us a couple of years to build on top of that to get this thing fully productized and rolled out so we can do this in an elegant way, and it works great. We think for most networks, or I'm sorry, for most publishers, depending on their network reliance, we'll generate anywhere from a 25 to a 50% lift on top of what they were doing from their other Generation 1 SSP, which is huge, huge dollars for publishers. So it's a big bang in SSP land, and we're out there cranking on it right now. Yeah,
and in terms of sort of the launch in the US, you launched it a couple of months ago. You say it's seen significant yield for publishers. When are we likely to see this launched in Europe?
We're shooting for end of Q3 to get a launch out in the UK, and it's really just a couple of currency things. The fundamental technology is built, just working on some currency stuff. As soon as that's done, we'll roll it out.
So in terms of the network piece, why are they not, this might be a silly question, the add-on question, but why are they not just bidding in the OTB auction? Or they just have agreed deals with the publishers effectively?
So it's, like I said, it's a whole different buying model. These RTB buyers are able to inspect the impression and the user behind the impression and match cookies and compare it to their database about what information they have about that user all in real time. Very different than what a network will do, which is typically
just buy the impression effectively.
Just, we're going to take that impression, we're going to put an ad, and we're going to rev share how much money we make with the publisher, and we don't even calculate that revenue share until the end of each day. So on Wednesday, we're going to tell you how much money you made on Tuesday, and that'll back out into an effective CPM, and that's just an ongoing iterative process. So rev share model over here, and discrete bidding at the user level on the RTB side. Very different ways of buying.
Yeah. Okay, Jason, thanks very much for bringing us through that new product release, and we look forward to seeing it on the market, and next time you come in and tell us why your RTB marketplace is the best.
I look forward to that conversation.
And that was Trader Talk TV, and we'll see you next week.